So, how's it going, fellas? Norm Hamlet,
Okay.
Mario Carboni, touring Alaska. This is quite the deal.
Yeah, we're glad to be up here. It's about our fourth year together touring here, and yeah,
I was going to ask. So this will be the fourth time you've both been here together.
Yeah.
But you, Mario, have come many times, right?
I've come for about 11 years, and then of course Norm, he beat me to it by quite a few decades when he came up with Merle.
Yeah, I came up with Merle. At that time, Bob Eubanks was our booking agent, actually. He had, of course, a TV show, a couple of TV shows, actually,
Brought you to Alaska.
Brought us up to Alaska. We flew in, and
Did you play Anchorage?
yeah.
Where? Anywhere else?
Yeah, one other place.
You guys went up to Fairbanks, right?
Yeah, Fairbanks, yeah.
That is, and what year was that?
Oh, boy, I can't remember the year. Wished I'd have wrote a bunch of this stuff down when we were traveling,
Memoir.
But, yeah, but
Probably early 70s, right?
I
Something
think
like that,
so, yeah.
I was going to say it had to be.
Yeah, because I think we had a 68. We'd bought a new 68 MCI coach, and I remember we had that. But of course, we didn't travel up here in it. But it was about that time we had the MCI coach, and
Come in the summer or the winter?
it was the summer.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it was the summer. Yeah, because the first one we played was outside. Worked out pretty good. We had a good time, and then of course we had to go back to California for a few days, and then back out on the road again.
So did you go to Bakersfield, or I mean?
Well, of course we lived in Bakersfield at that time,
But the recording sessions weren't done mostly in Bakersfield, were they?
well, some of them were, but we done most of them, at the time at Capitol Records down in Hollywood, and
That's awesome.
but we also done a few even in Buck's studio, Buck Owen's
really?
studio there, yeah. And of course later on, Merle wound up. He went up to around Redding, a little place called Palisadro, and he bought 500 acres up there. And of course, it had houses on it. And it was pretty much a ranch, And but anyway, we he wound up moving up there, and later I wound up moving myself out of Bakersfield up there, and he wanted me to, while we were home, he wanted me to kind of help out with some of the office work, So I moved up to Redding. Actually, it's about 7 miles out of Redding, was where his ranch was, and so I done that for a while, and then later on I wound up moving back to Bakersfield, and he wound up buying into a what do you call it? It was that.
Which one now?
The one with the boats and everything,
Lake Shasta.
Yeah, Lake Shasta. Yeah,
Houseboat.
Houseboats. Yeah, he bought into a big thing up there. It also had, a club and even some rental motel parts, things. And so he that was his place. He didn't want to move any place else,
Oh, and who can blame him if you could live that way and be a touring musician?
Yeah.
We could use a boat today in the weather.
Yeah.
Well, I have been listening to that era of music since I was a kid. I grew up in South Mississippi, so that music was the primary music you would hear anywhere you went.
Yeah.
Even after the rock and roll era, it's just such a huge part of the culture.
Yeah.
That was going to be my first question for you, was to ask you where you were from, because I could tell from your accent. So you must like Jimmy Rogers then, being from Mississippi.
I do, but I actually grew up, my dad was more into the hippie generation of music, so that's what I cut my teeth on. And then I got inspired by the 90s, the independent Seattle scene exploding. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So my real roots are in rock and roll, but culturally, I was immersed in that music. So it's interesting because my grandfather was a huge music fan. He loved Roger Miller, Marty Robbins, Don Williams. These are the people that he admired and would talk about with great admiration, you know. And then, of course, my dad thought all of that music was lame and it should all be the Doobie Brothers and Pink Floyd. Or, you know, that was his era.
Yeah.
But now, today, in my mind, being from my generation, I categorize all of that sort of in one zone because it's all such pivotal American music. And I feel like there's so much crossover now between those styles. Like some of my favorite artists, one of my favorite artists is Sturgill Simpson. You familiar with Sturgill?
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me how he blends these different elements. And just when you think you've got him figured out, he does a bluegrass album.
Yeah.
He's fully capable of pivoting between these styles. And I think that's where my head is with music is like we're far beyond that. It's not genre anymore. You know, it's more than genre.
Yeah. Yeah, Merle really liked Sturgill. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
What was he? Was he? I feel like I saw an interview once where he said Sturgill Simpson is the only real country music today.
Yeah, that's what he said.
That's a hell of an endorsement.
Yeah, it is.
I wonder, did they ever get to play together?
I don't remember ever doing a show, you know, at that time.
When did Merle pass?
In 2016, on his birthday.
How old was he?
He was 79.
Lived a charmed life.
Yeah, he did. He really did. You know, he straightened up, you know. Of course, Merle wrote that song, Mama Tried, you know, and that kind of explained the situation, sort of, you know.
And that's you in the intro. When we hear that steel guitar, that's you.
Yeah.
That is just, that blows my mind.
They played, well, on the intro, he does what they call a Batman.
Yeah.
That was the guitar player that you're talking about.
Yeah, Roy played that, you know, dun, dun,
yeah.
dun, dun, and then we done dun, dun, we call that the Batman.
So you were the band leader.
Yeah.
As well as the steel guitar. So for our viewers here, and myself included actually, what does that mean exactly to be a band leader within that era?
Well, basically just taking care of the band, you know, and making sure, you know, everybody's ready to go and dressed in the same suits and things. You know, we back in those days, you know, we bought suits from Nudie, you know, and basically the band looked like a band.
Right.
You know, and so basically a lot of people, you know, when you say he's the band leader, you expect them to get up, you know, and be up there like this, you know, leading the band. That used to happen, and I guess in orchestras, but not in country music. I was basically the band leader because I took care of the band, and you know, when Merle needed something or whatever, I mean, I would be the kind of the go-between, you know. But he didn't mind telling them himself, you know. But like I said, I just kind of was in charge of the band and hiring and firing, and we had some of the best musicians ever. I mean, we had some of the greatest country music, not necessarily country, but you know. We had some of the old Bob Wills members, actually, you know, Tiny Moore and Eldon Shamblin, guitar player, and boy, they just played great. We would do like if we done instrumentals, or even if done, you know, if we played some things in a song, and a lot of times they'd want to play parts. I'd usually wind up with the first part. They'd say, "You just go ahead and play first part, and we'll play." You know, Roy will play the second, and Eldon would play the third, and Tiny would play the fourth part. So we had some real good, you know, real good things that we got to do with those Wills brothers. You know, things that they used to do even back when they were with Bob. So it was interesting.
How many members were in the group?
Well. At different times, we had like 10 10 people.
It's a big group.
Yeah, 10 group, 10 musicians.
My company, Make a Scene, that's the name of my media company here in Alaska. I came up with this idea for Make a Scene by learning about the Austin music scene. I read a book when I was at community college, and it was about it was Willie Nelson's impact on that scene, which is huge, right? And what I was inspired by when I was learning about it was how basically Nashville put him out to pasture. They basically told him, "You're done for. Your usefulness has been completely exhausted," right? And he said, "I don't think so." And he does this thing in Austin that becomes its own thing. And he did that album where he hired his family to be the band. So you've got this sparse, amazing recording, but it's so sparse, right? And I was just so inspired as a musician myself. I've always, I felt like the way the industry works doesn't help us cultivate culture at a local level. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite.
Sure.
So so Make a Scene as a company started with the idea that we can make a scene here on our own.
Sure.
Well, then I'm reading about Bakersfield, and I'm thinking, well, this is the prototype for Austin, right? Like that's where that has to be, because Bakersfield was also a departure from the Nashville sound.
Oh yeah, they in fact they wanted Merle and Buck, to come back to Nashville, and they said, they both told them, said, "No, man, we're doing okay in Bakersfield," because we recorded, in Hollywood,
right?
And we used to go down, we used to play clubs, around Bakersfield. And then we would go down and record, we'd go down there in the morning and play, on some records, and then we'd get back in time to play at the club, I remember, myself, I was playing 7 nights a week in a club before I went on the road with Merle and doing a TV show 5 days a week.
That'll keep your chops up.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So what would you say, looking back on the development of that scene, and then Austin coming after that, what are the benefits of being apart from the Nashville mainstream? I would imagine there's got to be, like, creatively, there's got to be a lot of benefit to that, because you're not being pressured.
Yeah, that was the thing, Merle and Buck, they basically just done their thing. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to show people what they could do. And we had a lot of musicians at that time around Bakersfield, because there's a lot of clubs around Bakersfield that were using, there's a lot of people, of course, from Oklahoma and Texas and different ones that moved out to Bakersfield, actually. And because they could play in a club like I said, 7 nights a week if they wanted to,
Right.
And back in those days, the clubs were full because people were still dancing then, see, because that was before, of course, the internet came in and everybody started getting, TVs real large and watching the TV I mean, it just turned into another thing later, but like I said, most all of us done some TV work there in Bakersfield, along with Tommy Collins and Gene Shepard, Ferlin Husky, and there's just a bunch of them, that were really talented, and we had them there in Bakersfield. And
they felt that creativity. They come there
and
they get to experience something that Nashville really suppresses.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of what you're saying too, is about the producer at Capitol Records, Ken Nelson, who Norm told me was a trombone player, and he, if it was Merle or Buck, instead of it being Nashville where it's artist A or B with the same group of studio musicians, it's Merle and Buck with their own band, the Strangers or the Buckaroos. And I think having that cohesiveness that they learned to do on the road, I mean, Norm talks about they do these tracks, where they have 3 tracks, right?
Yeah.
They did the rhythm track, the lead track, and the vocal track. And if you screwed up your take on the lead track, they'd go back through and say, well, was the feel good? Okay, well then the mistake wasn't too big of a deal. They'd go for the feel, you know.
Right.
Yeah, they go for the
and
feel.
Ken, the producer over at Capitol, he didn't jump in and he didn't try and produce. I mean, he just let the bands do what they were going to do. I think that's the key thing right there.
But that means the band has to be rehearsed. You couldn't do that with studio music. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't achieve the same goal, right?
Yeah. Well, the good part is, see, Ken, he was smart actually, because he wouldn't tell somebody how to do a record or sing it or play it. He would let them do their thing. And I mean, that's what the people heard. They heard Merle Haggard doing a Merle Haggard song, and he sang it the way he wanted to, not the way some A&R guy told him to do.
Yeah, because you guys were bringing your own sound to the studio.
Yeah, we were bringing our own sound in the studio, and that's the way we wanted to do things. And there's some, you know, back in Nashville, you got these guys. Notice what happens? It winds up being the A&R guy's record instead of the artist.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so that's why they wanted to stay in Bakersfield, because they knew they could go ahead and record Capitol, and Ken would just let them have their way. You know, that's what the people were buying. You know, they wanted to hear Merle Haggard sing his songs, and they didn't at the time. You know, they thought, well, okay, this is good. You know, because some guy's not working with a record company to tell them how to record a record.
Right. And not just the recordings too. I mean, I heard a story about like Buck Owens on the Opry, you know, that like I think it was maybe a turning point for him, as being so disgusted because he showed up there to play and he was informed that only Opry technicians could adjust his guitar amp. And I don't think that flew too well, you know, but
well, that type of stuff, as I do sound engineering live. I do music myself. I perform, I write songs, I do these things. And my passion for music comes from there, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all art to me. So when I see music being processed into something that's inauthentic, it just turns me off entirely. I just don't want anything to do with music that's not real. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean, like, even if it's digital music, if it's well done from an artist's perspective, I can appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there's so much cookie cutter music out there. Mm-hmm. And you look back at, like, if I were to rewind time and listen to my favorite radio station from the 90s, 8 out of 10 of those songs are forgotten. Mm-hmm. No one's ever going to think about those again. And the stuff the cream that rises to the top is always authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the things we like to do when we perform, is we like to play solos, and we feel like, you know, a lot of that has been lost now. It's almost like, you know, you'll hear, I won't single out a specific genre of music, but you'll hear whatever genre, and it'll come up to where the guitar player might take a solo, and instead it's a 2-bar tag of the most cliche lick you've heard repeated over and over again. And so, you know, sometimes when we do shows, Norm will take 3-4 solos, and we'll go back and forth between each other. We'll communicate. He'll do a lick, and I'll take that lick and I'll quote it back to him. Or, you know, like, I mean, back then, you know, one of the really cool things that, like, we've done some sessions together where we were recording live with a video, and I heard him screw up. It rarely happens, but it happened on occasion. Now, he remembered the next time it came around to that exact spot, and he screwed up the same way the second time. So you had to be creative back then when the tape's running, and you can't go back and lay it down. So you got to figure out, like, in 20 seconds before that song comes back, how am I going to make this cool? And all of a sudden, it becomes a really neat part. And I stopped one time. I remember asking him what he's doing. I said, "Did you mean to do it?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I just, you know, I fixed it right there, you know." And so it's pretty incredible, because it's all done in, like you're saying, real time, live. We have a friend named Jimmy Phillips. He's a drummer in Bakersfield, and here's another interesting fundamental difference. And I don't know, Norm and I've never talked about this part before, but I'm sure he probably would agree. And that is that Jimmy feels that the Nashville sound started in the church, and the Bakersfield sound started in the bars. So, I mean, it's kind of a fundamental difference there, I think.
So I wonder, what does that mean exactly? Like, so the Nashville sound, why would we think it started in the church? I get the Bakersfield sound because it's honky tonk, right?
Yeah.
I think if you look at some of the lyrics and stuff, some of those hard-working, working man blues and stuff like that is very relatable to what they were going through at the time with the labor camps and the cotton fields and everything that was going on there. Not that, any genre is superior to the other, but I've always kind of felt like that. It's Nashville Sounds had quite a gospel influence on it, where the Bakersfield Sound, they did do that stuff too, but it was real life situations, that were
there were no string sections in the Bakersfield Sound, right? They didn't do any of that big production stuff.
No. In fact, it's kind of funny because at one time, we were down doing some session work down in Hollywood at the Capitol Studio, and we were like staying in a little motel down there because he had about 6 songs he wanted to record, so I think we had 3 days that we were going to use to record, the songs that he'd done. And anyway, we got to recording, and so before we went down one day, Merle said, "Hey," "I just wrote this song." He said, "It's kind of about me and Bonnie," and he said, "I hear violins." He said, "I want to put maybe a violin section on this song." We said, "Well, okay, whatever you think, it's your call, naturally." And so he said, "Yeah," he said, "I think we'll do that." He said, "What we'll do is he said we'll just lay down like a rhythm section, We won't be playing a bunch of licks and things on it right now." He said, "We can add those later. I just want to get the rhythm section down, playing the songs." He said, "Then I can call in the violin section, and they can lay down theirs, and any guitar things that we want to put on there, we can do it." And we said, "Well, that's fine," So we went on down the studio, and so everybody, the guys that were doing, of course, the rhythm, the bass, drums, and piano, and so Merle said, "Well, yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and sing along with this, And so we started, the guys started the rhythm and everything, and I think Roy played a little guitar thing on the front of it, and that's about all he done. So anyway, we got through this, the song, and then they started playing it back, and they had real big speakers out in the, out in the studio part, and what came over those big speakers, and man, it sounded great. But like I said, all it was the rhythm section, and Merle singing it. But the thing of it was, when that thing got through and we all heard it, everybody basically, it's the same thing, same time, they said, "It don't need no damn violin section on it."
So no violins.
And so he didn't add the violins on it. We said, "In fact, it just sounds great the way it is." And that was the way it was released. We didn't do a turnaround thing in the middle, or it was just.
Which song was that?
"Today I Started Loving You Again."
Today I started loving you again.
Just listen to that, because all there is basically rhythm section, and Roy maybe doing a little da-da-da-dum thing, with the guitar, and that's about it. Nobody gets to play in the middle of it or anything. It's just the song just goes right through.
That's it reminds me of when I was in my 20s and I would do all these recording sessions. I always wanted to I would hear things, I'd want to put it all in there, and in the end, the song was lost.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a hard lesson to learn, because creatively I wanted to expand.
Rolling Stones, they had called to see if Merle could do do one of their shows in Fort Worth, Texas, and at that time, Merle was booked up. You know, he looked to see if he could do it, and he did. He looked it up, and he had to tell him, no, we're booked up, and I signed the contract, and so we couldn't make that show. And after he hung up, he says, we probably won't hear from him anymore. He said, we'll wait and see, see what happens. And so later on, they called back and they said, hey, can you play for Little Rock, Arkansas? Said we're supposed to be doing a show there. And Merle looked it up and on his schedule, and he said, yeah. He said, we can do that. And so we wound up opening for the Rolling Stones, and we opened the show, and like I said, they had a curtain that was, if you were out in front, you couldn't see through that curtain. It's kind of a weird deal, but if you were back behind stage, you could see the crowd and see the stage, who were playing. So anyway, when we got through with our part of the show, we went backstage, and there was all the Rolling Stones, and they wanted to shake Merle's hand and tell him how good a show it was, and they really liked it, and we got a few pictures with them, and then later their road manager said, hey, says, you know what? He says, they never watched the opening acts. But he says they watched Merle.
That's crazy.
And he said they watched the whole show. So that was really good, Yeah.
In front of 60,000 people.
Yeah, and like I said, they were big fans of Merle's,
Well, and I guess that's what really stands out to me about Merle Haggard among a small group of other country artists, how they've transcended that genre entirely. It's just, it's so far beyond, it's iconic American culture. It's a part of the American experience.
Yeah.
And
Buck used to call it American music, the stuff that he used to play.
Overseas, they do call it American music.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard. Country music is referred to as American music.
Yeah.
Which is, that right there, it wraps it up. That's the...
Yeah.
Well...
I started to mention to you, too, when we was talking about Merle imitating Marty Robbins on the TV show back in Nashville. It was on that TNN, when it was still going. It was, let's see, what was his name? Ralph Emery Show.
1, 2, 3, 4. I told Mary about us. I told her about everything.
And every once in a while I see it on YouTube. So if somebody would be interested in it, they might type it up and see if it'll come up. But it's funny to watch Marty when Merle starts singing like him,
Yeah,
it's
I'll have to look
interesting.
that up. Maybe we can get a clip for the video.
Yeah, like I said, it was the Ralph Emery
He
show.
didn't want to imitate Buck Owens, though, did he? Remember, he says, well, he'd kill me if I did that. And then Buck comes up from behind him, I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that was on
the Glenn Campbell show,
Glenn
right?
Glenn Campbell show. Yeah.
Quiet. You got to do Buck Owens. Okay, do Buck. Oh, the sun's gonna shine in mine. Luck's gonna look here again. Things are gonna be the way they were before. Luck's gonna.
Glenn Campbell, he done a lot of our sessions. I would say our sessions, Merle sessions, but he played guitar on a lot of sessions, but he also sang harmony with Bonnie, so. When we'd go in and do things, at that time he was working with a group called the Wrecking Crew. They were on many records, but we got acquainted with him early, and he was still working some with them, and he in fact, even after he got his hit song, and started touring. He was still coming in and singing with Merle and playing some guitar,
That's the amazing thing, that the music that Capitol was cranking out, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
what Studio A you had maybe Frank Sinatra or the Beach Boys recording, or the Mamas and Papas, or maybe the next day in Studio A or in Studio B you'd have Glenn Campbell sitting in with Merle Haggard or Red Simpson, or you know, or James Burton crossed over too on a lot of stuff too, didn't he?
Oh yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too. Glenn Campbell come in one day when we was recording. You know, he was on the session, of course, and he come in. He said he had this song on that, you know, and he said, "Yeah, I just cut this new song." He said, "I think it's really going to do something good for me." And he'd been on Capitol though for quite a while, you know, even before Merle got on, but he just never had that one that really hit #1. You know, they played it a lot on the radio and everything, but it just never seemed to really go up to the top of the list. And
by the time I get to Phoenix,
let's see what you think. You know, he said, "I think it's going to be #1, I believe." And so then he played it, and of course his voice started, "By the time I get to Phoenix, she'll be rising." You know, and everybody listened to it, you know, and of course naturally that was his really first big hit. And
which was after Gentle on My Mind.
Yeah,
That's
it was
what
after,
we were talking
after
about.
Gentle on My Mind, actually. You know, and Gentle on My Mind just didn't seem to do much. You know,
it became more well-known later.
That's what happened. See, after he got that one that made it to the #1, then they started going back and hearing.
It's interesting how when an artist can find that way to connect with the audience, it's almost like now that they feel like they know the artist, they can appreciate the other, you know, album tracks and things like that.
Yeah.
But you got to have that, like you say, you got to have that #1, that breakthrough moment where the audience really connects.
Yeah.
And that's not many people have as many of those moments as Merle Haggard. Well, I'll tell you, fellas, if I could, I would sit here and talk for 2.5, 3 hours with you. This is some of the most interesting stuff. I love it. But if we go any longer than my video, nobody will watch a long video on the face. Everybody's attention span's 2 minutes now.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk about, so this Friday, Mario Carboni, Norm Hamlet, live at Friday Flings from 11:30 to 1:30. I'm going to be the sound guy, and I'm so excited to be part of that. Are you guys bringing any guests that day? Is it just the duo, or?
I believe we'll have Alyssa Overby of the Overby in a family band in Sutton joining us on Washboard. Yeah. So
That's
we're
great.
excited to play with her and just be the 3 of us.
And then afterwards, you guys are going to walk across the street to the Alaska Veterans and Pioneers Home for a meet and greet which I think they're going to appreciate so much. And they've hired the Moccasin Stompers, which is a classic country band here locally. So those guys are going to be pretty excited to be, you know, in that. But anyway, I just appreciate you guys so much being willing to come play at Friday Flings. It's a beautiful community event. Hopefully the rain won't be too bad, or hopefully not at all.
Yeah.
It's just going to be great. I'm so excited.
Well, this time of year we say welcome to Alaska, where we don't tan, we rust.
That's the time of year. Yeah. How long are you guys going to be in the state?
He's up here with me for about another 4 or 5 shows till Sunday or so. We're doing a show in Cooper Landing, and then Salmon Fest, and the one for you. And I'm up here till the end of August, till September 1st. So 3 months for me, and then he joins me for about 10 days up here. You know, he has a family, which I don't have, so I know I can get away a little bit more than he can, I think. But he's.
Yeah, I got to visit with my family once in a while.
It's a good investment of time.
Yeah.
Well, what day? What's your set? And what day and time for Salmon Fest?
We start at 11:30 and we go till 12:10 on the river stage.
And that's Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get to wake everybody up.
Good. I'm going to be driving down there early that morning, so hopefully I'll be there by that time. I plan to leave out about 5 a.m. So
that'll be great.
Well, you fellas made my day. I really appreciate it. And I know our viewers and our listeners are going to appreciate it. They can come see both of you this Friday, August 5th, 11:30 to 1:30 at Friday Flings in downtown Palmer. And we strongly encourage folks to come out and experience that and see what it's all about.
Well, between the three of us, we're going to use all 30 fingers. So
Yeah.
That's great. Well, you guys have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming by.